Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The morning after I told my mother I'd finally saved up $700,000, she vanished with my safe. Just like that. No warning, no screaming match, no hint of hesitation. One moment, everything felt fine, or as close to fine as it ever got with her, and the next, all that remained was an empty space where the safe used to sit and a goddamn handwritten note left sitting on my kitchen table, resting underneath my half-finished coffee mug like some kind of final insult. I invested too much in you. This is just me taking what I deserve. That's what she wrote. Nothing more. Not even a signature. As if her absence alone was loud enough to carry the rest. And the worst part? I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't even scream. I just stood there, staring at that note, then at the hollow space where the safe had been bolted to the wall behind my bookshelf, and I laughed. Dry, bitter, stunned laughter, the kind that makes you feel older than your own mother. It was such a familiar move, so damn typical of her, that for a second I wondered how I didn't see it coming. I mean, I should have. I really should have. Because I'd seen that smile the night before, the tight-lipped, polished one she wore like a mask whenever she was pretending to be proud of me. It wasn't real. Not even close. It was the same smile she wore at my high school graduation, when she told me afterward that the only reason she came was to see if I'd trip crossing the stage. The same smile she wore at my wedding reception, just before whispering in my ear that my husband would cheat within 5 years. She was right about that one, actually, but that's another story. We'd had dinner together that night. I cooked, of course, rosemary chicken and garlic mashed potatoes, something I knew she liked but would never actually compliment. She arrived wearing that beige trench coat she always thought made her look younger, and sat down with the grace of someone expecting to be served. There was a strange peace between us that night, something artificial, like cheap perfume sprayed over a trash can. I should have trusted my gut right then, should have known something was off when she offered to pour the wine instead of commenting on how I'd overcooked the chicken. But God help me, I wanted a moment. Just one moment of calm. One moment where I could say, "Look what I did, Mom," and have her actually look at me like I mattered. I still remember the exact words I used. "I've done it," I said, trying to sound casual, like it wasn't the biggest damn moment of my life. I hit 700,000. Saved it all myself. Every dollar. It's in the safe, tucked away. She smiled. That smile. The smile that should have warned me right then and there. She didn't say congratulations. She didn't ask how I'd managed it. She didn't ask what I was going to do with it. She just said, "Well, I guess hard work pays off eventually," then raised her glass and took a sip like we were toasting to some corporate merger instead of my life's biggest achievement. I should have kicked her out right then. But I didn't. Because part of me, the part one hate the most, still wanted her approval. Still thought maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. That maybe we could sit there like two normal people, two women connected by something deeper than shared blood and mutual disappointment. That maybe, even for just one goddamn night, I wouldn't have to brace myself for whatever poison she slipped into her words next. But she waited. Waited until I went to bed. Waited until my guard was down. And then she took it. Not just the safe, but the whole damn moment I'd built for myself. Like she always did. Like she always had. I stood there, rereading that note 5 or 6 times before I finally sat down, elbows on the table, the tips of my fingers pressed to my temples. My whole body was buzzing with disbelief, but beneath that, something colder was rising. Something sharper. Not rage. Not grief. Something else. Something cleaner. Because, you see, what my mother didn't know, what she never even thought to consider, was that I had planned for this exact moment. The thing about my mother, about Diane, is that she never gave without expecting a return, never loved without calculating interest, never raised me without treating every scraped knee or sleepless night like an unpaid invoice that I'd better be ready to settle someday. And the most twisted part of it all? For a long time, I thought that was just how love worked. That affection came with conditions. That kindness was a temporary loan you'd eventually be forced to repay with guilt, obedience, or silence. She never hit me, not with fists, anyway, but she had a way of speaking that left bruises, a voice smooth like silk but laced with barbed wire, each sentence crafted like a contract I hadn't agreed to but somehow was already bound by. "I didn't have to keep you," she used to say, usually after I'd failed a math test or spilled juice on her favorite rug. "I chose to raise you, and you better remember that when I'm old and need help." I remembered. I remembered it every damn time I turned down a college party because I couldn't afford to flunk out. I remembered it when I worked 3 jobs just to keep my shitty little apartment and eat something more than instant noodles. I remembered it when I watched my friends start families while I stayed up until 2 a.m. balancing spreadsheets for freelance gigs, trying to claw my way out of the financial crater her emotional blackmail had left me in. She didn't support me through college. I did that myself, on loans and tips and 20-hour workdays. She didn't help me buy my first car. I paid for it in crumpled dollar bills and broken fingernails from cleaning hotel bathrooms for minimum wage. And yet, every time she called, every time she popped into my life like a seasonal cold sore, she acted like I owed her for simply breathing. You want to hear the real truth? Fine. I built my entire life like a poker hand I couldn't afford to lose. I played smart, stayed quiet, kept my head down while I stacked chip after chip, just not the kind you see in Vegas. No, these chips were unpaid overtime, sleepless nights, missed vacations, and years spent pretending I was fine while every part of me screamed otherwise. That $700,000 didn't fall from the sky. It was forged in small sacrifices that added up, like pennies melted into gold. And for the first time in my life, I thought maybe I had something that was truly mine. Something she hadn't touched, hadn't tainted. But I should have known better. Because even if you build the house yourself, she'll find a way to steal the goddamn deed. After I found the safe was gone and read that note, her smug little manifesto, I drove straight to the police station. I wasn't expecting miracles, but I figured at the very least they'd file a report, maybe send someone out to take fingerprints, act like they gave a damn. But Detective Harris, Jesus. This guy couldn't have looked more bored if I'd walked in and told him someone stole my lunch instead of my life savings. He was mid-50s, thick mustache, coffee-stained shirt, and an attitude like he'd seen it all and didn't care to see more. He skimmed my statement like he was reading a bad menu and said, "So your mother took your safe? Was there any forced entry?" I said no, because of course there wasn't. She had a key. I'd trusted her. He raised an eyebrow and said, "You gave your mother access to your house and she took something? Ma'am, this might be more of a family issue than a criminal one." I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, "If I'd said it was my boyfriend who took it, would you be this dismissive?" He didn't answer. Just gave me a form and told me they'd be in touch, which we both knew meant they wouldn't. I walked out of that station feeling smaller than I had in years, like I'd regressed back to that teenage girl trying to explain to the school counselor why she flinched every time her mother touched her shoulder. And here's the thing. Here's the part one haven't told anyone until now. That safe, the one she stole, it wasn't what it used to be. See, 2 weeks before she took it, I'd swapped the contents. Not out of paranoia, not because I expected this exact betrayal, but because something inside me just didn't sit right. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was survival, maybe it was years of being raised by a woman who could turn affection into a weapon with a single sentence, but I moved the real money, every last dollar, into a separate location she didn't know about. What she took wasn't what she thought. But that's the funny part, isn't it? Because she always thought she was smarter. Always thought she was 2 steps ahead. But this time, I'd been watching her the whole way. And now, the real game was just beginning. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing someone thinks they've outsmarted you, while you sit calmly on the other side of the table holding the real cards, watching their every move with the quiet certainty of someone who's already planned 10 steps ahead. That's exactly how it felt the moment I realized my mother had taken the decoy safe, the one I'd planted, the one I'd intentionally filled with a cocktail of smoke, mirrors, and just enough danger to make her choke on her own pride. She thought she'd stolen $700,000. What she'd actually taken was a trap disguised as treasure. Let me tell you how that safe came to be. A few months ago, something in my gut started whispering, soft at first, then louder, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't have a specific reason, no concrete suspicion, but there was a heaviness in the air every time my mother came over. The way her eyes lingered just a little too long on the bookshelf behind which the safe sat. The way she asked, casually but too often, if I ever worried about keeping all that money in one place. And the way her voice sounded just a little too sweet when she asked if I'd ever thought about making her a copy of the house key, just in case something happened to you. It was all subtle, all plausible, all cloaked in that maternal concern she wore like a second skin, but I'd known her too long, seen too much of her poison, to believe she was ever just checking in. So I bought another safe. Same model, same color, same digital lock, same weight. I even scratched the corner just enough to make it look used, to match the one I already had. I installed it in the exact same spot, behind the bookshelf in the home office, and moved the real safe to a different location I won't even say out loud, not because I don't trust you, but because habits like secrecy don't die easily when you've spent your entire life being emotionally ambushed by the person who is supposed to protect you. And inside the decoy safe? That's where it gets interesting. First, I stuffed it with stacks of fake bills realistic enough to fool someone at a glance, but worthless under scrutiny, the kind used in film productions. Then I added a GPS tracker, one of those tiny high-end devices you can monitor from your phone, battery life up to 60 days. I tucked it between the stacks of bills where it wouldn't be noticed unless someone tore everything apart. But the final piece, that was the crown jewel. A manila envelope, clearly labeled, containing a single document that could gut my mother's entire social life, her finances, and any shred of self-crafted reputation she still clung to like a rosary. That document was a notarized statement from a former employee of hers, someone who worked in her accounting firm back in the 80s before she retired under suspicious circumstances. Someone who had kept copies of shady tax filings, manipulated books, and a few under-the-table client transactions that could easily attract the attention of federal auditors if the wrong, or right, person saw them. I'd stumbled across it by accident when I was helping that same former employee move apartments last year. I was boxing up old files, and there it was, proof of the things I always suspected, but never had the means to prove. I made a copy. Just one. I never told anyone. I didn't even look at it for months. But something in me had said to hold on to it, not because I planned on using it, but because I wanted to know that if she ever pushed too far, if she ever crossed a line she couldn't uncross, I wouldn't be left defenseless again. And here we are. When I saw the safe was gone, I didn't panic. I opened my phone, pulled up the tracking app, and watched the blinking on the map moving across town. I waited, watched, tracked it patiently as it bounced from one street to another until it stopped, dead, at a cheap roadside motel 30 miles from my house. That's when I knew she had no idea what she'd actually taken. Because if she had, she wouldn't have gone anywhere near that place. She would have run farther, hidden deeper, vanished completely. Instead, I got in my car, drove there in silence, heart steady, not out of fear but out of a cold, focused clarity I hadn't felt in years. When I arrived, the room was empty. Door locked. No sign of forced entry. But the front desk clerk remembered her, a well-dressed older woman with sharp cheekbones and too much perfume, carrying a suitcase and a strange, heavy black box that she kept close to her side like a pet. I let myself into the room. And there it was, the safe, sitting right there in the middle of the floor like a gift no one knew what to do with. She'd left it behind. Abandoned it. Why? That was the question I couldn't shake. Had she opened it already? Had she seen what was inside and panicked? Had she realized, too late, that she'd walked straight into a trap designed by the very daughter she always underestimated? But she was gone. Not a single trace of her. No purse, no clothes, not even a lipstick on the bathroom sink. Just the safe, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air, and the question echoing in my head like a gunshot in an empty hallway, where the hell did she go? And more importantly, what did she take with her besides that safe? Because something told me this wasn't over. Not even close. I stood in that cheap motel room longer than I meant to, surrounded by stale air and scratchy bedsheets and the faint scent of my mother's expensive perfume clinging to the curtains like a ghost that hadn't figured out it was dead yet. The safe sat in the middle of the floor like some sad little trophy, but I couldn't bring myself to open it just yet. Not because I was afraid of what was inside. I already knew, but because I wasn't sure what I wanted to feel when I did. Vindication? Anger? Relief? I didn't feel any of those things. I felt hollow, like someone had already cut the tension out of my body and left only the scaffolding behind, brittle and creaking under the weight of something I couldn't name. It wasn't until I saw the envelope sitting beside the dresser, tucked halfway under the hotel room's ice bucket tray, that everything shifted. It was thick, sealed with a strip of old clear tape, and in the center was my name, just Claire, written in my mother's careful, sharp cursive. The kind she used on formal invitations and holiday cards. The kind she used when she wanted to seem composed and dignified, even when she was telling someone to go to hell. I stared at that envelope for a long time before picking it up, already feeling the heaviness inside. It wasn't cash. It wasn't documents. It wasn't anything I expected. When I tore it open, the first thing that fell out was a letter I recognized immediately, my own handwriting, awkward and slanted, from when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. Dear Mom, it started, and I didn't even need to read the rest to know what it was. I remembered that letter. I remembered writing it after a school play she hadn't come to, pouring out all the messy little thoughts in my child-sized brain, asking why she didn't love me the way other moms seemed to love their daughters, asking if I'd done something wrong, if I could do better next time, if maybe I'd be enough one day. I'd never given it to her. I thought I'd thrown it away. But here it was. And it wasn't alone. There were dozens more, old letters, notes, cards I'd written over the years and never sent. Birthday drawings, little apology scribbles from when I thought I'd disappointed her, fragments of emotional debris I'd buried long ago. All gathered neatly in that envelope like some twisted museum exhibit curated by the very person who'd caused the damage in the first place. She had kept them all. Every word I never meant for her to see. Every vulnerable scrap of my inner child, held in her hands for years while she continued playing the cold, indifferent mother. So what the hell did that mean? Was it guilt? Was it some kind of backward attempt at connection? Or had she just saved them like trophies, proof of how deeply I'd once wanted her love, how desperately I'd bent myself trying to earn it? I couldn't tell. And that uncertainty was worse than anything she could have said outright. It gnawed at me in a way her usual venom never could. I sat on the bed holding those letters like they might explain something, like maybe if I read them all again, I'd find some secret code in the margins that would finally tell me who she really was underneath all the performance. But all I felt was confusion. And beneath that, a slow, creeping ache I hadn't felt in years, the ache of not knowing whether I was mourning the mother I'd had, or the one I'd invented in my head just to survive her. Later that evening, I met Linda at a little bar downtown, one of those places with dim lighting and overpriced cocktails where the music was just loud enough to drown out your thoughts if you let it. I told her everything. Every last detail about the decoy safe, the GPS, the document, the envelope full of childhood ghosts. She listened, sipping her drink with the quiet patience only old friends can manage when the story is too heavy to carry alone. You know what I'm going to say, she said after I finished. You need to go public. If that document can ruin her, then maybe it's time you finally burn the whole damn house down. I knew she was right, at least partly. That file could destroy my mother's carefully preserved image, the one she still clung to in her country club circle, the one she used like a shield to hide the rot underneath. But part of me hesitated. Not because I wanted to protect her, God no, but because I wasn't sure I wanted to be the person who finally pulled the trigger. I'd already spent years digging myself out of her wreckage. Was it worth diving back into that pit just to throw the final punch? Linda leaned forward, lowering her voice. Or maybe she wants you to do it. Maybe this whole thing was a setup. Maybe she's got something else planned, and she's just waiting for you to move first. I didn't have an answer. I just nodded slowly and finished my drink, trying not to drown in the idea that even now, Even after stealing from me, even after all this, my mother might still be controlling the story. When I got home that night, my phone buzzed. No number. No name. Just a single anonymous message sitting in my inbox, glowing at me like a warning flare. Check the news tomorrow. That was it. Nothing more. No explanation, no signature, no detail. But I didn't need it. Because I knew that tone. I knew that cadence. I knew that goddamn punctuation. It was her. And whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be quiet. The next morning, just like she said, the news hit. It wasn't loud at first, not a breaking headline or some dramatic scandal plastered across the front page, but it started bubbling in the quieter corners of the internet. Little whispers in business newsletters and financial blogs that most people wouldn't notice unless they were already watching closely. But I was watching. I was watching because I knew that message, check the news tomorrow, wasn't sent as a bluff or a warning. It was a goddamn promise. And true to form, my mother never broke a promise when it came to chaos. By noon, the whispers had turned into noise. Whistleblower documents expose fraudulent bookkeeping and tax irregularities at Beach and Harper Consulting, the headlines read, and with each update, I felt the blood in my body turn colder. Beach and Harper wasn't just any firm, it was my old employer, the place I had poured 6 years of my life into before finally breaking away to start my own path. I had walked out of that place with nothing but stress ulcers and a severance package I had to fight tooth and nail for. And now, thanks to my mother's meddling, that place was imploding in slow motion for everyone to see. She had used the document. Not against me, not directly, but as leverage in a game I didn't even know we were still playing. That file I'd tucked into the decoy safe wasn't just about her past, it was about the firm's past too. She must have realized it, must have seen some thread in those papers that I hadn't noticed, something she could yank hard enough to unravel an entire institution. Maybe she'd held on to it for years, waiting for the perfect moment. Or maybe she only connected the dots after stealing the safe and realizing what kind of bomb she was holding in her hands. Either way, I'd given her the tool without even knowing it, handed her the weapon that would let her burn an entire building down without lifting a match. I felt sick. Not because I cared about the firm, it was a cesspool, and I knew it, but because it was now clear that this had never been about the money. Not really. My mother didn't need $700,000. Hell, she probably already had that much squirreled away in some offshore account nobody would ever find. What she wanted was something far more dangerous. She wanted control, legacy, leverage. She wanted to watch people squirm under the weight of her secrets. And worse, she wanted me to know that she could still outmaneuver me, even now. I paced my living room for an hour that afternoon, replaying everything in my mind, the letter, the envelope, the safe, the GPS tracker, the news articles scrolling across my screen like a funeral procession for the last piece of normalcy I had left. I wanted to scream, to punch a wall, to throw my phone across the room, but none of that would change the fact that I had been played. Again. And not just played, used. Used to deliver the very ammunition she needed to make her next power move. That night, I sat on my back porch drinking cheap wine straight from the bottle, trying to calculate my next step. Should I go public myself? Should I expose the full story, put her in the spotlight instead of letting her manipulate things from the shadows? Should I finally dig up every skeleton she's buried over the years and lay them bare for the world to see? Or should I let it go, walk away, pretend none of this ever happened and protect what little peace I'd managed to build since cutting her out of my life? But that's the problem with peace, it doesn't hold up well against fury. Around 9 o'clock, just as the sun dipped below the trees and the sky turned that strange, bruised shade of purple, my doorbell rang. No knock, just the bell, twice, then silence. I opened the door to find no one there, just a small brown package sitting neatly on my doormat. No return address, no label, nothing but my name written across the top in thick black ink. Not even my full name, just Claire, like the envelope in the motel room. Like a signature written without writing. I took it inside, heart pounding in that slow, rhythmic way that tells you your life is about to split down the middle. The box was heavier than it looked, sealed tight with thick tape, but I didn't need to open it to know who had sent it. Still, when I finally cut the tape and pried open the flaps, what I found inside made my skin go cold. A single USB drive, black and plain, sitting on top of a folded piece of paper. I picked up the note first, hands trembling despite myself, and read the single sentence she'd left for me. "Watch this before you make your next move." I stared at the drive for a long time, wondering what it held. Another confession, another game, another manipulation designed to pull me further into her chaos. Or maybe it was a threat. Maybe it was proof of something even worse, something she was keeping just in case I ever tried to fight back. But either way, one thing was clear: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't open the USB drive right away, not because I was afraid of what might be on it, but because I already knew whatever it held would be some kind of message. Some final monologue from the woman who never missed an opportunity to turn pain into performance. I poured myself another glass of wine and sat down at my kitchen table, the house so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming like a warning in the background. The drive felt heavier than it should have in my hand, like it was carrying not just a file, but the weight of everything she'd ever left unsaid. I plugged it into my laptop with a kind of numb detachment, as if maybe that would protect me from whatever damage was about to spill across the screen. The file opened automatically. No password, no menu, no title card, just the grainy, uneven footage of what looked like my living room, shot from a handheld camera. She must have propped it on the counter or balanced it on a shelf, because the angle was off-kilter and a little shaky, but the picture was clear enough to see everything. My mother walked into the frame wearing that same beige trench coat, her hair pulled back too tightly, her lipstick just a little too red, and her eyes sharp as broken glass. At first, she didn't say anything. She just stood there looking around the room like she was memorizing it, like she wanted to drink in every detail of the space before she tore it apart. Then she walked to the bookshelf, pushed it aside, and knelt in front of the safe. She took her time, entering the code slowly, deliberately, like she wanted the moment to last. And when the door clicked open, she looked straight into the camera and smiled. But it wasn't the usual smile, not the cold, triumphant curve of lips I'd come to expect. This one was tired, like even she wasn't sure what winning meant anymore. Then she spoke, her voice low and steady, almost too calm. "If you're watching this, Claire, then you already know I took it. I took what I deserved. Don't pretend you're surprised. You've been preparing for this longer than you'll admit. You're more like me than you want to believe." She paused then, pulling out the contents of the safe, flipping through the fake stacks of money with a faint look of amusement that didn't quite reach her eyes. When she found the envelope with the document, her face shifted, her expression tightening into something unreadable. "I should have known you'd hide something," she said, more to herself than to me. "You always were too clever for your own good. Cold, calculating, too smart, too quiet, too guarded. You think that makes you different from me? It doesn't. It makes you exactly like me." And then something happened I didn't expect, something that twisted the knife in a way I wasn't ready for. Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Not performative, not crocodile. Real. She blinked them away fast, like she didn't want them to be seen, but it was too late. They were there. The damage was done. "I never wanted a daughter," she said, voice cracking just slightly. "I wanted insurance. I wanted someone who'd owe me forever. But somewhere along the line, you stopped owing me and started beating me at my own game. And I hated you for it. I hated that I couldn't control you anymore. I hated that you made me feel small." She stood up then, clutching the decoy envelope and looking directly into the lens again. "But I also envied you. Because you were never really mine to mold. You were always your own. That's what I never could stand." The video ended there, abruptly, with no goodbye, no apology, no final threat. Just her face fading into static. I sat there for a while afterward, staring at the black screen, feeling nothing and everything at the same time. No tears. No rage. No real sense of closure. Just that hollow thud of history folding in on itself like a collapsed lung. And then I laughed. Not a loud laugh. Not a joyful one. Just a quiet, bitter chuckle that came from somewhere deep in my ribs, the kind of laugh that slips out when you realize you've been running in circles only to end up exactly where you started. Because in the end, she didn't win. Not really. Not in the way she wanted to. She took the safe, sure. She got her dramatic moment. She thought she'd delivered the final blow. But she never knew the truth. I never had $700,000. Not a damn cent. That number was a lie, a baited hook I dangled in front of her just to see if she'd bite. The safe was a decoy, yes, but not just physically. The whole idea was a trap, a fabricated milestone designed to test her, to see if the monster I remembered was still alive beneath her polished smile and crocodile tears. And she walked right into it. Because this was never about money. It was about control. It was about proving that I could manipulate the narrative the same way she always had. It was about finally writing the ending on my own terms. So yeah, she stole the safe. But I stole the narrative. She took what she thought was power, but I took the last word. And that's why I couldn't help but laugh. A few minutes later, I picked up my phone and stared at the screen for a while before finally dialing a number I hadn't called in years. When the line connected, I didn't hesitate. Hi, yes. I'm ready to move forward. Let's talk about transferring the actual money. And maybe that was the final move. Or maybe it was just another part of the game.